So here, in order to clean up the back side, because on a single bevel the back of the blade is still a cutting edge, I cleaned it up a bit. It's kind of hard to get focus. It's getting the scale on the ceiling and my bow hanging from it. But cleaning up the back side of a single bevel is also sharpening the other side of the blade. So this blade was really nicked up. You saw pictures earlier, and because this steel is so hard, I start with a 240 grit diamond plate. I won't even attempt to sharpen this type of head without diamonds. Sandpaper, just, you'll eat it up. It's a waste of time. So how do I know when I've got a full cleanup, a good edge? Well, there's a burr on the back that I can feel, and that you can probably see. It's that bright white line. Because this is 240 grit, it's a pretty big burr. As you get through the smaller grits, you won't be able to feel the burr. So I take a piece of post-it note. If it runs into a brick wall, if it cannot pass, it's running into that burr. So as I push on here, see how the paper bends? It doesn't even want to go any further. If I flip it over, it slides right off it. Now you can see I still have some nicks on this leading edge of the blade right here that I need to get rid of. So I'm going to keep going on that. Alright, so now I've got the bulk of that nicks in there gone. Again, you can see the paper is running up against the burr. Now that I've got this burr, what do you do with it, right? Well, you can use the same grit plate that you're sharpening on, lay it flat, pinch it, and just give it a couple of strokes to get rid of that burr on the back side. Remember, even though it's a single bevel, you still have to sharpen both sides as if it were a double bevel. Now that I've done that, you'll see that the paper slides right off. So now that I've gotten a burr and a good cleaned up edge with 240 grit, and again I'm sharpening at 32 degrees with this sharpener because that's the bevel for this blade, 32 degrees. Now I'm going to go through 400, 800, 1200, 2500 and buffing compound, but at each grit you're going to get a burr. You're going to feel the burr at 240, you're going to feel it at 400, certainly with the paper at 800 and the paper at 12 and 2500. When you get to the buffing compound, you're not going to be able to feel a burr on the back side. But if you've gotten a burr at every grit, you will be sharp. So I'm going to keep going on this, and then I'll come back when I've gone through all the grits. Alright, so now I've gone through all the grits, including 2500, the last grit that I used. I said that at 2500 grit it's kind of hard to feel the burr. So here is our finish at 2500 grit. So it'll be hard to feel the burr with your fingerprint, but again, the paper runs right up against it. So you'll know you have a burr. This is key. If you don't get a burr at every grit, you'll never get a head sharp. So Again, the last step is lay it on the edge of a plate that you've sharpened, or the same grit. Here it is, 2500 grit. Lay it smooth. Do not create a bevel on the back side. Again, you only want a single bevel. You're just breaking the burr off here. So a couple of strokes and you've gotten rid of the burr. Let's try it with the paper. Slides right off. Now we have chased a little bit of the burr to this side. It's hard to feel, but it is still there. And from here we're going to go to buffing compound next. But as of right now, that is the edge that we've restored. So I'll do buffing compound. For buffing compound, this just happens to be an old piece of cardboard. I've coated it with buffing compound several times. I've done several heads on it. You only want, on the bevel side, you only want to do a pull stroke. Don't push in, because all you're going to do is it'll be like a putty knife scraping off the buffing compound. Use a pull stroke and just keep repeating that. Now when we get to the end of the buffing compound strokes, I'll show you how to break the burr off then, so I'll be right back. Now that I've gone through all my buffing compound backward strokes, this is the edge that we're dealing with now. On the back side, there will be a small micro burr. But at this point, it's time for me to take it out of the guide anyway. So, to break off that small, very small micro burr on the flat side, I take the blade out of the holder. Now, you can literally lick the tip of your finger to get it moist. Get the blade to stick, hold it for a second, and then you can slide the blade back and forth under your finger on the buffing compound. We've pushed a small burr of buffing compound sized burr from the tapered edge, the beveled edge, to the flat side. We need to get rid of that. The best way to get rid of it is with the same grit that you created it with, in this case buffing compound. So we will give it several strokes, get rid of that burr. See how it clings to my finger? Now, let's inspect that edge. Again, I had to take it out to do the tanto tip anyway. I had to reposition it. So we will have a blade that will bite into my fingernail, won't glance off. And I'll do a little bit of sharpening. Well, we can actually try it right now. Let me grab a rubber band. I have one here. You can give it a try. Plain old rubber band. Let's see what happens. So right away, we're pretty sharp here. I don't have to slice, I just have to push the blade, right? So we've taken a pretty destroyed edge and restored it. Tanto tip is next. Stay tuned. Now let's look at the tanto tip after going through all the grits as well as buffing. The same thing. Burr removed. We have it positioned for that move. You can see the untouched version that was pretty abused. And so that's the position to do the tanto tip. If you value a tanto tip, I don't necessarily do, but I wanted to keep it the same for this particular head. Welcome back to This Old Broadhead. In this episode we are taking a new to the market broadhead that was tested and abused and shot through a variety of materials, really messing it up, but that's what tests are all about. Earlier I showed you that I cleaned up this edge. So we're going to kind of inspect what we've got going on here. So this is the portion that I still need to restore. This is the edge that I've already cleaned up. So it looks like this head can be restored and turned to service. Still spins true. There's nothing really wrong with it. A lot of the material during the tests are embedded into the metal. But once I clean it up and hit it with the 32-degree sharpener, which is what this single bevel is sharpened at, we will be back to a pretty good blade, almost like new. So I'm going to clean up the other side and then I will be back. As I begin the process of restoring the other side of this head, again, I've started with 250 grit. Now most people would look at this and say, yep, I think I'm done with 250 grit. Looks like it's cleaned up pretty well. And that's where most people fall short and get frustrated. They call me and say, man, I spent a lot of minutes on it and a bunch of strokes, and I can't seem to get it sharp. And I say, did you get a burr? And they either say no or they say, I don't know. So while this looks like, boy, I should be able to go to the next grit, 400, let me see if I'm there yet. No. So I haven't achieved a burr yet. So I have to still keep going, even though it looks like, boy, I got it all done. I should be able to switch over. Nope. Without a burr, you are not done. I could go through all the other grits and buffing compound, and this head would look spectacular. It would still be dull because I haven't reached a burr. As I advance through the grits on the second side of this head, I'll again talk about getting rid of the burr. So this happened to be 1200 grit. When I get done and I've got a burr, I can leave it in the jig. I run it right up against the edge of the guide and I tip it until I don't see daylight, and then I give it a stroke. This means you need a flat surface. If you're trying to do this with sandpaper, it better be on a piece of plexiglass or something rigid that allows you to have some backing. This piece of sandpaper won't be strong enough. That's all you want to do. You do not want to create a bevel on the backside. So the burr is gone now, and now I can go to the next grit as I progress through. Here is the ferrule before cleaning it up. Since it was also part of the test, I'll give it a little bit of sprucing up as well. Here it is after a little bit of cleanup. The slicker things are, the easier they pass through an animal. If things are smooth, they slide through with ease. Now I've got the head put back together after all of the sharpening is done, and you can see that the 32-degree angled guide was able to bring back all the edges. What I didn't talk about was the tertiary edge, which is this fine little point here. With the tanto tip, if you don't do that, you aren't going to end up with a sharp tip. So that gets free-handed. If you value a tanto tip, you're going to have to do that. But at any rate, we've got a great finish all the way through. Head spins true. We took it from basically a destroyed head and turned it back into something that is, again, usable. And let's do a little bit of look at sharpness now. Seems that everybody's favorite test seems to be shaving, so let's give that a try. That's just one pass, not a lot of pressure. So clearly it shaves. The fingernail test is my favorite. Does it bite into a fingernail on a glancing blow? If it skips off, it's not very sharp. This one is obviously very sharp. I contend sharper than it even came from the factory. So you don't have to dispose of a head just because it's dull, and this is a high-end head, an expensive head. There's no reason to turn this into a practice point. It's certainly huntable again. Would I hunt with it? Heck yeah. I mean, it's just like new. So the 32-degree bevel sharpener is what you would use for this particular head being sharpened at that bevel, and that's for all the back, the main blade, the tanto tip. Again, the tertiary tip, that you'll freehand while it's in the guide, if you value that. Again, I don't even value a tanto tip, but it came with that, so let's restore it to the way it was. This is a fantastic head made of fantastic steel, and even though it was really abused in testing through steel, wood, concrete, a lot of guys would have thrown it away and said, no way, I'm not going to fix that head. We were able to restore it. So a head that's simply been shot through an animal, maybe hit the dirt, there'll be no issues returning it back to the quiver with the 32-degree guide from Stay Sharp.